purpose. It is the spring of 1592. Seoul is burning. King Seonjo has fled north in the dark, abandoning his capital before a single Japanese soldier reached its walls. But the men setting Gyeongbokgung Palace on fire are not Japanese. They are Korean slaves, and they are burning the only documents that prove they belong to anyone. So how did a foreign invasion end up freeing nearly 1 million Joseon slaves when their own kings for 200 years refused to? To understand what burned that night, you have to understand what Joseon Korea actually was. By the late 16th century, the Joseon dynasty had ruled Korea for 200 years under a rigid Neo-Confucian order. At the top, the Yangban, the scholar aristocrats. Below them, commoners, farmers, artisans, merchants, paid the taxes and fought the wars. And below them, the nobi, slaves. By 1592, historians estimate they made up between 30 and 40% of the entire population. In some southern provinces, the majority. They were registered, inherited, gifted, mortgaged, sold. The child of a slave mother was born a slave for life. The Jaegwon, the Office of Slave Administration, kept the master ledgers in Seoul. Then, on the morning of May 23, 1592, a fleet appeared off the coast of Busan. 700 ships, 158,000 Japanese soldiers under the command of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Within 3 weeks, they would take Seoul. Within 2 months, Pyongyang. The king would flee to the Yalu River, and in the chaos that followed, Joseon's slaves saw something they had never seen before, an opening. The night King Seonjo abandoned Seoul, he left before sunrise. His ministers scrambled, the royal guard scattered. By dawn, the city was effectively without a government. Before a single Japanese soldier crossed the Han River, the people of Seoul began to riot. And they did not loot at random. They went first to the Jaegwon, the slave records office, the single building in Korea where the legal proof of their bondage was stored. They burned it to the ground. Then they went to the Hyeongjo, the Ministry of Justice, where supplementary slave records were kept. They burned that too. The scholar Ui Byeong, the prime minister who lived through the war, wrote about it directly in his memoir, The Jingbirok. He recorded that the slaves burned the records to erase the proof of their status. Then the fires spread. Gyeongbokgung Palace, Changdeokgung, Changgyeonggung, all 3 royal palaces burned, not by Hideyoshi's army, by Korean hands. For the slaves, it was not vandalism, it was paperwork. In a society where your name in a registry meant your body belonged to another man, the registry was the chain. And when the registry was ash, who could prove who you were? By the time Japanese troops marched into Seoul on June 12, 1592, they entered a city already half destroyed, and tens of thousands of slaves had simply walked out. But the war was just beginning, and what those freed slaves did next would force the Joseon court, for the first time in 2 centuries, to negotiate with them. The Joseon army of 1592 was a disaster. Officer corps gutted by court factionalism, soldiers untrained. Within 60 days of the Japanese landing, the regular army had effectively ceased to exist. King Seonjo, exiled to the northern border, did something unprecedented. In late 1592, he issued a series of emergency edicts. Any slave who killed a Japanese soldier in battle would be granted commoner status. Any slave who killed an officer would be granted yangban, aristocratic status. Any slave who turned in the head of an enemy would be freed on the spot. This was the Myeoncheon-beop, the law of liberation by merit. Across the country, the righteous armies, the Ui Byeong, formed in the vacuum. Local militia raised by Confucian scholars, Buddhist monks, and farmers. And in their ranks, by some estimates, more than half were former slaves. They harassed Japanese supply lines, cut messengers in mountain passes, recaptured small towns. They were not professionals. They were people fighting for something specific, their freedom, registered in a new kind of ledger. because the king's edicts had to be enforced. And so officers began to keep manumission rolls, written promises of freedom in exchange for service. Even Admiral Yi Sun-sin, in his Nanjung Ilgi war diary, recorded the crews of his turtle ships included slaves promised freedom for naval service. By the end of the 7-Year War in 1598, the Joseon state had issued tens of thousands of these documents. But the war ended, and when it did, the Yangban wanted their slaves back. The question that would tear apart Joseon society for the next 50 years was simple: whose paper was real? The war ended in 1598 with Hideyoshi's death and the withdrawal of Japanese forces. What it left behind was a country in ruins. Pre-war population estimates put Joseon at around 14 million. By 1600, possibly fewer than 10 million remained. Famine, plague, and forced deportation to Japan had hollowed out entire provinces. The Yangban returned to find their estates burned, their fields untended, and most importantly, their slaves gone. Many had simply walked away during the chaos. Others held royal manumission papers. Some had taken new names in distant villages, and the Jaegwon registry, the master document that proved who belonged to whom, was ash. The court tried to reconstruct it. Edicts were issued ordering slaves to return to their masters. Some did, by force. Many did not. There were not enough officials, not enough records, not enough soldiers to hunt them down. A new category emerged in the records: slaves of unknown registry, men and women who could not be traced. The state, desperate for tax revenue, increasingly chose to register them as commoners rather than chase ghosts. Then came a second blow: the 1623 coup that brought King Seonjo to power. Then the Manchu invasions of 1627 and 1636. More war, more disruption, more slaves vanishing into the chaos. By the mid-17th century, the slave population had collapsed. Where nobi had once made up nearly 40% of Korea, that number was falling fast, to 30, then 20. The state that had spent 2 centuries refining the laws of slavery was now quietly, administratively, walking away from them, not out of mercy, out of exhaustion. The fires of 1592 had not freed the slaves of Joseon in a single night, but they had broken something that could not be put back together. The chain had been paper, and the paper was gone. In 1801, more than 2 centuries after the Imjin War, King Seonjo would issue an edict formally emancipating most of the remaining government slaves. By 1894, with the Gabo reforms, slavery in Korea was abolished entirely. But the institution had been dying for a long time before that, and the wound that killed it was not delivered by a reformer or a king. It was delivered by a fire set in the spring of 1592 by men and women whose names were never recorded, because they had just finished burning the only place those names existed. The Imjin War is remembered for Admiral Yi Sun-sin's turtle ships, for Hideyoshi's ambition, for the suffering of a peninsula caught between empires. But it should also be remembered for this: that when the Joseon state collapsed, the people at the very bottom did not wait for permission. They walked into the burning offices of their own government and they erased themselves from the books. In the end, the institution that had bound nearly 1 million human beings was not abolished by a king's mercy. It was abolished by a foreign invasion, a fleeing court, and a fire that no one ever wrote down who started. History rarely frees anyone cleanly. If you want to understand the war that made all of this possible, the 7 years that broke Joseon and rewrote East Asia, the next video on this channel walks through the Imjin War from the night of the Busan landing to the final naval battle at Noryang Strait, where Admiral Yi Sun-sin took his last breath. It's the story of how 150,000 Japanese soldiers came within weeks of conquering a kingdom, and how a handful of men, ships, and mountain monks turned them back. Subscribe if you want the rest of this story, because the fires of 1592 were only the beginning of what Joseon lost and what